The Pacific waters north of Oahu lay eerily calm in the pre-dawn darkness as Vice Admiral Nagumo's massive task force took its final positions. From the bridge of the flagship carrier Akagi, Nagumo gazed through binoculars at the horizon, knowing that within hours his aircraft would unleash devastation upon the unsuspecting American naval base at Pearl Harbor. 200 miles away from their target, the 6 carriers of Kido Butai, the striking force, maintained perfect formation while their escorts of battleships, cruisers, and destroyers provided a protective screen around them. The Japanese task force had completed one of the most audacious naval operations in modern warfare. For over 10 days, 31 warships had traversed thousands of miles of ocean from their secret anchorage at Tankan Bay in the remote Kurili Islands, maintaining strict radio discipline and avoiding all commercial shipping lanes. The carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku carried a combined force of 432 aircraft, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, fighters, and reconnaissance planes, all prepared for the most ambitious aerial assault in naval history. Admiral Nagumo, a torpedo warfare specialist who lacked extensive experience with naval aviation, felt the immense weight of responsibility for an operation that had consumed months of meticulous planning. The attack plan, conceived by the brilliant Admiral Yamamoto, represented a desperate gamble by the Japanese Empire to neutralize American naval power in the Pacific before the United States could fully mobilize its industrial might. Yamamoto himself had warned repeatedly that attacking America would awaken a sleeping giant, but Japan's military leaders had concluded that war with the United States was inevitable given the economic pressures and diplomatic deadlock. As dawn approached on December 6th, the carriers turned into the wind to prepare for the launch that would come at first light the following morning. Flight deck crews worked feverishly to position aircraft, load ordnance, and conduct final maintenance checks. In the ready rooms below deck, pilots studied intelligence photographs of Pearl Harbor's layout, memorizing the positions of Battleship Row, the fuel storage facilities, and the dry docks that represented the heart of American naval power in the Pacific. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who would lead the first wave of attackers, reviewed the attack plan one final time with his squadron leaders, emphasizing the importance of achieving complete surprise. 3,000 miles away in Washington, D.C., American cryptographers worked through the night in the basement of the Navy Department, processing an unprecedented volume of intercepted Japanese diplomatic communications. The Army's Signal Intelligence Service and the Navy's Communication Security Unit had been monitoring Japanese radio traffic for months, having successfully broken the diplomatic code known to American intelligence as Purple. On this Saturday evening, they began receiving what would become known as the 14-part message, Japan's final diplomatic communication to the United States. The first 13 parts of this crucial message had been intercepted, decoded, and translated by early evening. Lieutenant Commander George Lynn of the Navy's Op-20G section reported that parts 1 through 4 had been received at 11:49 hours, with additional sections arriving throughout the afternoon. By 21:05 hours, Commander Arthur McCollum's intelligence unit had completed translation of 13 of the 14 parts, revealing Japan's categorical rejection of American diplomatic proposals and effectively announcing the end of negotiations. The message's contents left no doubt about Japanese intentions. Part 13 explicitly stated that the imperial government could not accept the American proposals as a basis for continued negotiations. When President Franklin Roosevelt read these intercepts in the White House that evening, he turned to his naval aide, Captain John Beardall, and remarked grimly, "This means war." The implications were unmistakable. Japan had made its final diplomatic gesture and was preparing for military action. What made the situation even more ominous was a separate communication intercepted the same day, instructing Japanese Ambassador Kichisaburo Nomura to present the 14-part message to Secretary of State Cordell Hull at precisely 1 p.m. Washington time on December 7th. American intelligence officers recognized the significance of this timing immediately. Major diplomatic presentations were not scheduled with such precision unless they were coordinated with military operations. The 1 p.m. deadline in Washington corresponded exactly to 7:30 a.m. Hawaiian time, the perfect moment for a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. Commander McCollum, who served as Roosevelt's communications routing officer, ensured that these critical intercepts reached the highest levels of government within hours of translation. Secretary of the Navy. Frank Knox received his copy while entertaining guests at his residence, though he could not discuss its contents immediately due to the presence of others. Secretary of War Henry Stimson and Secretary of State Hull were both notified, and arrangements were made for a meeting of the three cabinet secretaries at 10:00 hours the following morning. The intelligence picture became even clearer when additional intercepts revealed that Japan had ordered its embassies worldwide to destroy their codebooks and cipher machines. On December 5th, the Navy had intercepted messages directing Japanese diplomatic posts to burn their most sensitive materials immediately. Every experienced intelligence officer knew that such orders preceded the outbreak of war by mere hours or days. When combined with reports that Japan had recalled its merchant marine from sea routes across the Pacific, the pattern became unmistakable. Yet despite this wealth of intelligence, Admiral Husband Kimmel, commander of the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, and General Walter Short, commanding the Hawaiian Department, remained unaware of the developing crisis. Both men had been systematically excluded from the most sensitive intelligence reports, receiving only routine warning messages that provided no specific information about Japanese intentions or timing. This deliberate withholding of crucial information would later become one of the most controversial aspects of the Pearl Harbor attack. The Japanese spy network in Hawaii had been providing regular updates on American fleet movements and defenses throughout the autumn of 1941. Takeo Yoshikawa, operating under the cover name Tadashi Morimura from the Japanese consulate in Honolulu, had been transmitting detailed intelligence reports since March. His communications, intercepted and decoded by American intelligence, provided precise information about ship movements, patrol schedules, and defensive preparations at Pearl Harbor. On December 2nd, Yoshikawa had reported no changes observed and noted that American forces do not seem to have been alerted. Most significantly, on the morning of December 6th, Yoshikawa transmitted what would be his final intelligence report. There are no barrage balloons up, and there is an opportunity left for a surprise attack against these places. This message, intercepted by American radio monitoring stations, provided definitive confirmation that Pearl Harbor would be the target of Japanese aggression within hours. The fact that such specific tactical intelligence was allowed to flow unimpeded to Tokyo demonstrated the extent to which American leaders were prepared to permit the attack to proceed. Admiral Yamamoto's concerns about the wisdom of attacking America had been well documented in planning sessions throughout 1941. The architect of the Pearl Harbor operation understood better than most the industrial capacity and fighting spirit that war would unleash from the American people. His famous warning that Japan would run wild for perhaps 6 months before American production overwhelmed Japanese forces proved remarkably prescient. Yamamoto had argued that Japan's only hope lay in forcing a negotiated settlement before America's superior resources could be brought to bear, but he also recognized that attacking Pearl Harbor would likely produce the opposite result, galvanizing American resolve for a prolonged and bitter conflict. The planning for Operation Hawaii, as the Pearl Harbor attack was known to the Japanese, had required extraordinary coordination and secrecy. The task force had assembled at Tankan Bay on November 22nd, with final preparations continuing until departure on November 26th. Navigation charts had been specially prepared to show the most remote route to Hawaii, avoiding commercial shipping lanes and areas of regular patrol activity. Weather reports indicated favorable conditions, with cloud cover expected to provide concealment during the final approach. Fuel supplies represented a critical constraint for the operation. The task force included 8 tankers to provide underway replenishment during the long voyage to Hawaii. The success of the entire operation depended on maintaining fuel reserves sufficient not only for the approach and attack, but for the high-speed retirement that would follow. Admiral Nagumo had been instructed to withdraw immediately after the attack, avoiding the temptation to launch additional strikes that might expose his force to American countermeasures. The aircraft assigned to the attack had been specially modified, and their crews extensively trained for the unique challenges of the mission. Torpedo bombers required special shallow-running torpedoes to operate in Pearl Harbor's relatively shallow waters. Dive bombers carried armor-piercing bombs modified from naval artillery shells, designed to penetrate the thick deck armor of American battleships. Fighter aircraft were configured for extended range to provide escort protection and to strafe airfields, preventing American fighters from interfering with the attack. In Washington, the final pieces of the diplomatic puzzle fell into place as Saturday evening turned to Sunday morning. The 14th and final part of Japan's message arrived in the early hours of December 7th, confirming what American intelligence had already deduced. Japan was formally breaking off diplomatic relations and would present this decision to the American government at the precise moment when Japanese aircraft would be beginning their attack on Pearl Harbor. The coordination was so exact that it could only have been planned to provide maximum psychological impact while ensuring that America could not claim to have been attacked without warning. General George Marshall, Army Chief of Staff, would later be criticized for his handling of intelligence on the morning of December 7th. When shown the complete 14-part message and the 1 p.m. delivery instruction, Marshall chose to send a warning message to General Short in Hawaii via commercial telegraph rather than using secure military communications that might have provided faster delivery. This decision, which resulted in the warning arriving several hours after the attack had begun, became the subject of intense scrutiny in subsequent investigations. The Japanese task force maintained perfect radio silence throughout its approach, contrary to later American claims. Modern research has revealed that American radio direction-finding stations intercepted numerous communications from Admiral Yamamoto to his task force commanders between November 17th and December 6th. Station H in Hawaii recorded 83 separate messages during this period, providing American intelligence with precise tracking information about the approaching fleet. The myth of Japanese radio silence was later promoted to obscure the extent of American foreknowledge of the attack. As the sun set on December 6, 1941, both sides were fully committed to the course of action that would transform the Pacific War from a regional conflict into a global struggle. Admiral Nagumo's task force was positioned for the attack that would come with dawn, while in Washington, American leaders possessed detailed knowledge of Japanese intentions, but had chosen to allow events to proceed. The stage was set for a date which will live in infamy, the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor that would bring the United States fully into World War II. The weather conditions on December 6th favored the Japanese operation. Heavy cloud cover provided concealment for the task force during its final approach, while relatively calm seas allowed for smooth aircraft operations. The carriers had spent the day positioning themselves for the pre-dawn launch, with flight deck crews working in shifts to ensure that all aircraft would be ready for combat operations. Pilots attended final briefings, studying recognition charts and reviewing their specific targets within Pearl Harbor. Admiral Nagumo faced a crucial decision about whether to launch a second wave of attacks after the initial strike. The operational plan called for 2 waves of aircraft, but much would depend on the success of the first attack and the level of American response. If significant resistance developed, Nagumo had orders to withdraw, rather than risk his irreplaceable carriers in a prolonged engagement. The Japanese Navy's entire strategy for the Pacific War depended on preserving these 6 carriers for future operations. Communication between the task force and Tokyo remained essential for coordination with diplomatic activities in Washington. The timing of the attack had to coincide precisely with the delivery of Japan's final message to ensure that the formal declaration of war preceded the first bombs. Any deviation from the planned schedule could provide American forces with crucial warning time or allow diplomatic intervention to prevent the attack. American forces in Hawaii continued their normal weekend routines, unaware of the approaching danger. Many ships of the Pacific Fleet were moored at their usual berths along Ford Island, presenting perfect targets for the Japanese aerial assault. Army Air Force's aircraft remained clustered at Hickam Field and Wheeler Field, vulnerable to strafing attacks that would prevent effective defense of the naval base. The concentration of American military assets in Hawaii represented both the strength of the Pacific Fleet and its greatest vulnerability. The intelligence failure that permitted the Pearl Harbor attack would become one of the most studied events in American military history. Despite possessing unprecedented insight into Japanese diplomatic communications and having broken the codes used by Japanese naval forces, American commanders in Hawaii remained uninformed about the specific threat to their installations. This compartmentalization of intelligence, whether deliberate or accidental, ensured that local forces could not take defensive measures that might have reduced the effectiveness of the Japanese attack. As December 6th came to an end, the stage was set for one of the most dramatic military operations of World War II. Admiral Nagumo's task force had successfully approached within striking distance of Pearl Harbor without detection, while American intelligence services possessed detailed knowledge of Japanese intentions but had not acted to prevent the attack. The collision between these two forces would reshape the entire strategic landscape of the Pacific War and bring the United States into the global conflict with unprecedented unity of purpose.